next Wednesday. The top teams in North America and Europe, they start their fight for regional glory at Rift Rivals, and G2 will be contending there, as well as Fnatic and the Unicorns of Love from the side of EU. And then we have TSM, Phoenix One, and C9 from the side of NA. And I asked you guys to weigh in on the best players in each role across the two regions. And we're going to start with Vedius, your EU/NA OP5. I am curious. Where is it? All right, so Vizicachi, Top, Broxa, Bjergsen, Reckless Jesses. Well, first up, only one NA name, which it is an EU name. So
it is an EU name, but Bjergsen is a resident from North America.
Yes.
And I just want to start off by saying that a lot of this is based off what I watched from C9 versus TSM and from watching P1 last night. So it's pretty based on their recent performances as well. And I think that starting with the top lane, Vizicachi, I think that going back to what Wonder said, he's consistent. While he definitely makes some bad plays here and there, for the most part, he is the most consistent top laner in Europe for the most part. Maybe aside from Wonder, of course. But we're talking about just Rift Rivals right now for the time being. So when I look at Hansa, when I look at Impact and Ray and how they're constantly being switched out, and when I also look at Zig, these three guys from North America, they just seem to be so variable in their performances. One game they're snowballing, the next they're getting smashed. And I feel like that even when we look at the top laners from EU, like Vizicachi just seems to be the most consistent and staple out of the three, which is why he's in that pick. Broxa, I feel is by far the strongest jungler in Europe. Super, very solid, very well-rounded player. Bjergsen, this guy is just extremely good, extremely experienced, and he is a big part as to why I think TSM will be a massive threat coming into Rift Rivals. And on the bottom lane, that shouldn't really be a surprise. I think that Reckless and Jezz by far and away outclass every opposition that will be achieving at this tournament.
Wow, that's a big one for me. Jezz and Reckless together as stronger than anything or the individual components of any team. That is there anything that you guys vehemently disagree with, Wonder?
I mean, I didn't keep in mind like synergies and stuff like that when I picked my all-star team. I just took like player for player. But I think like, while I agree that Vizicachi, I said like he was solid and he's like good mechanically like every game, I still think that he makes these mistakes where he can really cost his team, like this one game, which would matter a lot in like an all-star or like this
top five team. Yeah, if we look at those picks together, we see some differences. Impact there in the top lane, which I was speaking to Azael a little bit, asking for his opinion. I just gave him roughly you guys' picks, and he was quite surprised that Impact was your #1 just because he feels like Impact hasn't been doing well in NALCS so far. So then the question is, do you not rate Soaz or Vizicachi then higher than him?
Honestly, I don't watch, it's not like I watch NA a lot, but I've watched like the recent games, and I think, and from playing against Impact as well at Worlds, like I know this is a long time ago and a lot can happen since then, but he was always a really solid player and he always like played like really smart in a way where he would never get super smashed or anything, and he would always like play well with his team and coordinate with his team. So I think he's a really solid guy. And Jensen in the mid lane, he's like, I think like from watching against Bjergsen, he had the upper hand, and I think like the two mid laners there are probably, I would say they probably match like Caps or something like that in Europe, and I just wanted some variety as well, you know.
Yeah, well, let's overlap Sankook's picks there because you guys made this independently from each other, but I feel like it's quite similar. We're gonna take a look in just a second. You didn't talk to each other about it. No, you didn't. And the only thing you added was Impact/Ray, so I feel like you also didn't really know, so we just put them both there.
I actually mainly took it from last night's game versus TSM, and I feel like all games they were kind of outclassing top lane, it seemed like.
Very recent results. Yeah.
Very recent results, and for the jungle I have Broxa because I just think he's been performing way better than many other junglers in the EU right now, and I don't really see any of the three junglers from NA having as much impact as him. And for mid lane, it was in between three Danes, Bjergsen, Jensen, and Caps, but
Nukeduck wasn't able to be picked, so you can put it there.
That would be an obvious pick.
Obvious.
After last night, and it seemed like Jensen had the upper hand, I took him over Bjergsen, but I still think all three mid laners, like Bjergsen, Jensen, and Caps, are all three very close.
I think I want to echo that point as well, because like both Jensen and Bjergsen killed each other in that series last night. So they both really performed exceptionally well. And the only reason I feel that I couldn't put Caps there was just because of the lack of experience that he's had in terms of international competition. Bear in mind, he only joined the LCS last split, and this will be a massive opportunity for him to go against the other top dogs, because he's already had a lot of lessons from Perks, I feel, and now he's going to get to learn from two of the other superstar EU NA mids.
That's true. The only constant over the 3 rosters was Broxa in the jungle, and if we just recognize that as where he came from, not being in the LCS only for a couple of months in that team, he has grown tremendously. So why do you think he overshadows all of the other junglers in the tournament?
I think like for the junglers in both NA and Europe, actually, I think a lot of them are kind of evenly matched, but something when we play against Broxa that he does really well compared to others. Like his early game dominance is really good. He knows when to pressure, he knows how to play with his lanes. And I also think like something a lot of junglers don't do is like play around vision, where he sometimes if he knows he can't contest something, he will just stay in fuck. He will stay unknown, and then you have to be aware and like respect on other lanes as well, especially when you play side lane and stuff like that. I think that's what Fnatic does well and Broxa does well, especially.
It'll be very interesting to see him up versus the competition. Sandcox, no NA bottom lane support or AD carry in ours at least. And Azael did also tell me that he thought that Smoothie might have a one-up on Mithy in that regard, but I don't know if you guys have watched enough to say that. But why do you think not a Doublelift isn't in there, or Sneaky isn't in there, or whoever?
So, to me, like, I was going to put Smoothie in there, but then I watched his performance last night against TSM.
They're so down because of that last
the number of times he just randomly died, and the number of times he would try and get vision alone, like, just raised a lot of question marks for me. And I felt like that his contribution in a lot of the fights was just less significant than that of Jez's in the way in which he just seems to better coordinate with the rest of his team. And I feel like that right now, to me, it's just a little skewed towards Fnatic because of how dominant that bottom lane has been when they're able to get their comfort picks in particular. And I'm excited to see what Smoothie can bring, but yes.
Yeah, it's excited to see what everyone will bring, because obviously we're very much in this EU bubble and we see it all from the EU perspective. And we're also quite cocky, like everyone on Twitter and pro players and we as well. What if we crash and burn? What is the chance that we're too much in this bubble, guys?
I mean, you got to build up some hype.
Definitely.
Build up some banter.
Yes, EU is the best, right? That's the way it goes.
It's best of ones. And I talked to someone on Twitter about this. They were like, what do you think the actual chances of NA are? And I think that you always have to respect that individually, NA has like a ton of like really good talent. Like,
but none of them made a lot.
But like EU doesn't, like, just because we think they're better doesn't mean that they outclass them so much that like Chachi's just going to smash Impact, right? Like, I don't think the gap is that big. It's just in the ways in which we play around the map. I feel like the top teams in Europe right now have a really good understanding of macro in terms of controlling side lanes, vision, objective setup. And I just think that in NA, it's a lot more scrappy. There's a lot more fighting. There's a lot more action. And I think we'll see less of that unless EU gets baited into it by the playstyle of NA.
Agreed. Macro level seems to be higher in EU.
Like, I think this has been mentioned a couple of times already, but like the European teams we have at the moment at the top, they have like this really distinct style where if you haven't played against it, it's really, you can really get caught off guard, and like especially Fnatic and I guess Unicorns as well. If you suddenly see them go 5 mid, but I guess they're used to that in NA too, so I'm not really sure. But Fnatic, like playing against a Kennen with a Shin popping in suddenly and like flashing on top of you, and then you just instantly wipe all of you, then like stuff like this is really hard to play against if you haven't already, and I think that's what Fnatic has in their favor at least.
We'll see what happens. $1 million question: who's winning Rift Rivals? Eddie.
Who do I think will win? G2.
Nice stalling technique. Who do I think will win? Wonder.
Fnatic for sure, I think.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure about Fnatic as well.
All right, 2 votes for Fnatic. They are the best in Europe right now, and it seems that you guys have trust in them in terms of Rift Rivals. Well, it's coming to you next Wednesday from Berlin, with the first game starting at 5 p.m. Central European Summer Time.